In July 1965, a stunt pilot climbed into a one-of-a-kind aircraft on a desert film set for a routine pass. The shot wasn't even in the script, it was a backup take, what crews called a protection shot. The plane cartwheeled, broke apart, and the pilot was killed instantly. That was the production of The Flight of the Phoenix, a survival film about people who refuse to give up, made under conditions that tested exactly that. Today, 15 facts about The Flight of the Phoenix. From the decorated war hero who played a pilot because he was one, to the go-kart accident that set a fatal chain of events in motion, to the bonus that connects two of aviation's greatest tragedies across 3 decades. Fact 1. The man who died was performing a shot nobody needed. On July 8, 1965, stunt pilot Paul Mantz climbed into the Phoenix P-1 for a low pass over Buttercup Valley. The director already had what he needed. This was a protection shot. Extra coverage. As the aircraft skimmed the sand, the boom behind the wings snapped through. The plane cartwheeled and broke apart. Mantz was 61 with over 25,000 hours in the air. His partner Bobby Rose was thrown clear and survived. Mantz did not. Director Robert Aldrich personally insisted on a tribute at the end of the credits. A simple dedication with no music, no flourish. Just a name and silence. Audiences who saw it in 1965 reported sitting motionless until the house lights came up. Fact 2. James Stewart wasn't performing when he sat in that cockpit. When Stewart played Frank Towns, a pilot processing the weight of a disaster he blames himself for, he wasn't reaching for something unfamiliar. He was a real combat aviator, a decorated officer who flew missions over Nazi Germany in World War II. By the time cameras rolled in Arizona, he was a brigadier general in the U.S. Air Force Reserve, making him one of the highest-ranking military officers in Hollywood history. The weariness in his performance came from somewhere real. Stewart had experienced near disasters, fog-blind landings, and the specific exhaustion of long-haul flight over hostile territory. When his character broods about pilot error, it isn't acting in the conventional sense, it's autobiography. Fact 3. The German actor playing the arrogant engineer had survived a Nazi indoctrination school. Hardy Kruger, cast as the abrasive engineer Dorfman, carried a backstory most audiences had no idea about. Born in Berlin in 1928, he was sent at 13 to one of the Nazi Party's elite indoctrination schools. At 16, he was drafted into the SS in the war's final months. He refused to fire on American troops and deserted. He was captured, briefly sentenced, and barely escaped. Decades later, Kruger spoke regularly about his stolen childhood and worked publicly against right-wing extremism. The character he played, arrogant, certain, contemptuous, was almost the photographic negative of the man behind the role. Fact 4. The real desert was worse than the fictional one. The film's Saharan wasteland was actually Buttercup Valley near Yuma, Arizona, where the production spent 6 brutal weeks. Temperatures climbed above 46 degrees Celsius, roughly 115 Fahrenheit. Getting equipment to the location required hauling everything 17 miles into the dunes. The crew consumed around 500,000 gallons of water just to keep the access roads viable. Cameras overheated, actors collapsed between takes, makeup dissolved in real time. Aldrich refused to simulate the conditions with studio lighting. He wanted every drop of sweat to be genuine. Stewart, who had flown bombing missions in difficult weather, said Buttercup Valley was among the harshest environments he had ever worked in. For a man who had been shot at over Europe, that is a meaningful statement. Fact 5. A child's go-kart set the fatal chain of events in motion. The pilot originally scheduled to fly the Phoenix sequences was Frank Tallman, one of Hollywood's most respected aviators. Weeks before filming, Tallman injured his leg in an accident pushing his young son's go-kart. The injury became infected, he was hospitalized, and most of the leg was eventually amputated, though he later taught himself to fly with a prosthetic. With no other option, the studio contacted Tallman's business partner, Paul Mantz, to take over. If that go-kart had never tipped over, Mantz would not have been in that aircraft on July 8th. One of cinema's most devastating accidents traces its origin to a driveway and a child's toy. Fact 6. The plane was real, and it only flew for 9 days. Most movie aircraft are props. The Phoenix P-1 was different, a genuine FAA-certified airworthy aircraft designed by aviation engineer Otto Timm and built from scratch specifically for this production. It looked like improvised wreckage, but it actually flew. The Phoenix P-1 made its first flight on June 29, 1965. 9 days later, it was destroyed in the crash that killed Mantz. The production replaced it with a modified vintage North American O-47A pulled from an air museum. The two aircraft are visibly different if you watch closely. The silhouette shifts, the angles look slightly wrong. The Phoenix in the film's second half is not the same machine. Fact 7. The cast terrorized the town of Yuma with rubber corpses. Off camera, the mood was considerably lighter. Bored between shoots in the scorching Arizona heat, the cast began borrowing the lifelike prop dummies left over from the crash sequence. According to Aldrich, they drove through Yuma after dark, hurling dummies from moving vehicles, staging fake accidents to terrify locals. Even Stewart, widely regarded as the production's steady presence, eventually joined in, grabbing a prop machine gun and dramatically firing at the fallen dummies. When police pulled them over, the officers recognized Stewart and let the entire crew go. Being Jimmy Stewart, it turns out, carried legal protections not available to most people. Fact 8. The engineer's secret is one of the great plot twists in survival cinema. For 2/3 of the film, Dorfman holds the group together with a single promise. He can design a working aircraft from the wreckage. The men pour what remains of their strength into his blueprint. Then the truth surfaces. Dorfman doesn't design real aircraft. He designs model planes, hobbyist miniatures built on kitchen tables. The structure he's been describing might work, or it might kill them. Attenborough's reaction, the stunned, broken laughter of a man who has already committed to believing, is consistently named among the finest moments of his early career. The twist forces the film's central question. When you have nothing left, do you keep faith in something that might be absurd? A real pilot killed on a shot nobody needed, a war hero playing a version of his own life, a go-kart that changed aviation history. We're not halfway through. Still coming, the Oscar nomination that stunned every critic watching, the director who quietly brought his family into the desert, and the bonus, a connection between Paul Mantz and the most famous disappearance in aviation history. Fact 9. The Oscar nomination went to the actor nobody expected. The film assembled one of the most formidable male casts of 1965. Stewart, Attenborough, Finch, Kruger, Borgnine, Kennedy. When the Academy Award nominations arrived, exactly one actor was recognized. It was none of them. Ian Bannon, playing the sardonic mechanic Crow, received a Best Supporting Actor nomination. Critics who had spent months predicting the nod would go to Kruger or Borgnine were completely blindsided. Bannon didn't win, but the nomination established him as one of British cinema's most consistently underrated character actors, the performer doing the most interesting work in the least obvious corner of the frame. Fact 10. The director populated the desert with his own family. Aldrich didn't just direct the production, he staffed it partly with relatives. His son William plays one of the passengers killed in the opening crash. His son-in-law Peter Bravos appears as another doomed passenger. His daughter Adele worked on the production as a script apprentice. Aldrich liked surrounding himself with people he trusted on grueling shoots. Some critics later noted, not entirely unkindly, that the survivors seemed to be the cast members not related to the director. Fact 11. Peter Finch spent the shoot being kept functional by James Stewart. Peter Finch, playing the quietly authoritative Captain Harris, was managing a serious drinking problem throughout the production. Aldrich later acknowledged that he and Stewart had to act as informal handlers, doing what they could to keep Finch between the lines between takes. The desert heat made everything worse, and yet Finch's performance came through with a dignity the chaos behind the scenes never touched. A decade later, Finch won the Academy Award for Best Actor for Network. He died before the ceremony. The man who had to be guided through the Arizona heat delivered one of cinema's most celebrated final performances. Fact 12. The film failed commercially and then refused to disappear. When The Flight of the Phoenix opened in December 1965, audiences largely stayed away. Made for an estimated $3 to $5 million, it returned roughly $3 million in rentals, a significant loss. Critics praised the performances, but the deliberate pacing didn't match what audiences expected from a Stewart film. What followed was unusual. The film didn't fade. Late-night television, college film programs, and survival genre fans kept finding it across the 1970s and 1980s. By the 1990s, it was being discussed as a foundational text, a film that built the template Apollo 13, The Martian, Cast Away, and dozens of others would later follow. Broken machine, hostile environment, limited resources, characters arguing under pressure. Aldrich built that structure in 1965. Hollywood has been using it ever since. Fact 13. The entire town of Yuma was recruited to protect the dunes. The production needed Buttercup Valley to look like Libya, which meant every footprint, tire track, and tourist impression had to disappear. 20th Century Fox leased the area from the U.S. government for 5 weeks, then made an unusual request. They called the local Chamber of Commerce and asked for help. Local volunteers, journalists, and community organizers were recruited to patrol the dunes, sweep away footprints, and warn visitors off the sand. It worked. Every wide shot of barren emptiness in the film exists, partly because an entire small town agreed not to walk on a particular stretch of desert. Fact 14. The novel was written under a false name by a spy fiction author. The source material was published in 1964 under the name Elliston Trevor, a pen name. The author was actually Trevor Dudley Smith, a British writer who also produced the popular Quiller spy novels under other aliases. Dudley Smith was preoccupied with people pushed to psychological and physical limits. He reportedly wrote The Flight of the Phoenix during a difficult personal period, channeling his own claustrophobia and dread into the desert narrative. Without his particular obsessions, none of what followed, the film, the tragedy, the legacy, would have existed. Fact 15. The remake confirmed that some stories belong to a specific moment. In 2004, Hollywood revisited the film with Dennis Quaid in the lead. The production also featured Hugh Laurie, Miranda Otto, and Giovanni Ribisi as the engineer. The result was, by most accounts, a demonstration of how thoroughly a story can be technically reproduced and emotionally hollowed out simultaneously. The pacing was faster, the desert looked processed, and the central twist arrived without the accumulated weight that makes it devastating in the original. The remake underperformed commercially and has since become a reliable example of what disappears when a film built on patience is rebuilt for a presumed impatience. And now the bonus I've been saving for last. Long before Paul Mantz set foot in Buttercup Valley, he was Amelia Earhart's aviation advisor. He helped plan her ill-fated around-the-world flight in the late 1930s. He maintained her aircraft, prepared her routes, and worked closely with both Earhart and her husband, George Palmer Putnam, in the months before her departure. When Earhart vanished over the Pacific in July 1937, the loss hit Mantz deeply. He rarely spoke about it publicly. He kept flying. He kept performing stunts across more than 30 years of Hollywood productions. Then, in the summer of 1965, on a desert film set in Arizona, Paul Mantz died doing exactly what Earhart had done, pushing an aircraft just slightly past what it could sustain. Two of aviation's most significant figures, two crashes, the same irreducible margin between what a machine can endure and what we ask of it. The Flight of the Phoenix is a film about people who refuse to stop. It was made by people who couldn't.